This is a lecture from Open Tuition for paper F8 of the ACCA. For the free slides that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
This is question 3 from the June 2009 International Auditing paper. The first thing you should really do is to go to the requirement. Find out what the question is about. There's not a lot to be gained by reading the question, then only to find that it might be to do with debtors circularization, or inventory, or internal control, or engagement letters. Orientate yourself first. Here we can see it is to do with audit software. It also asks us about problems that can be encountered in the audit of Tyrrell and how each problem could be overcome. Note the verbs. The first one says explain, and part 2 says explain and then explain again. So it's certainly more than just list. The other thing to note, and not to get confused with, is that part A1 talks about the benefits, only the benefits of using audit software, and part 2 asks you to think about the problems in general that could be encountered in the audit of Tyrrell. In other words, part 2 is not limited simply to audit software difficulties. Having got ourselves orientated a little bit, we can read the question, taking careful note of all detail that the question contains. Remember, always assume that there's nothing in the question by accident, that the choice of words and detail have been carefully considered by the examination committee. It starts off saying that following a competitive tender. What possible significance might there be in adding that bit of detail about competitive tender? And perhaps it is that if there is a competitive tender, the audit firm has tried to keep its costs down, and to keep its costs down will be hoping to limit its work. That could give subsequent difficulties in completing the audit satisfactorily. It's a new audit client, and the first year of an audit is always the most difficult. You know little about the client, its staff, its procedures. Then we have information about dates. The company's year end is the 30th of June, with a scheduled date to complete by the 15th of August. And that's quite tight, it's about 6 weeks. And we're now at the 3rd of June. So all of our audit work has to be done within a couple of months, really. There's going to be considerable time pressure. It provides repair services to motor vehicles from 25 locations. And as soon as you have a business trading from 25 locations, the audit immediately becomes slightly more complex. There are 25 places that, for example, inventory can go missing. There are 25 places where probably accounting transactions have to be recorded. There may well be 25 computer systems. All inventory sales and purchasing systems are computerized, with each location maintaining its own computer system. So there we are. Multiple computer systems, potential for multiple breaches of security and errors. At least the software in each location is the same, because the programs were specifically written. But sometimes specifically written programs may not be as good or robust or kept as well up to date as package programs. The trouble with specifically written programs is that you are the only user, and it can be expensive to ensure that they're always up to date. Training can also be more expensive. Data from each location is amalgamated on a monthly basis. That's okay, to produce management and financial accounts. We're currently planning the audit approach, and one option being considered is to rewrite our audit software to interrogate the computerized inventory systems in each location, except for head office, as part of the inventory valuation testing. However, you have been informed that any testing will have to be on a live basis. And you're aware that July is a major holiday period for your audit firm. So we know we're going to have certain difficulties in staffing this specialized task adequately. We need to know what live basis means. And basically it means that you're going to be interrogating the real data from the real files rather than interrogating copy files and copy data. So we've read the requirements, we've read the question, we've underlined areas of detail which we think significant, and then we can embark on the question. A. Explain the benefits of using audit software in the audit of Tyrrell-Co. And it's 4 marks. Almost certainly you're looking for 4 benefits. These are going to be fairly standard benefits of using audit software, I should think. For example, it will tend to speed up the audit because many of the calculations can be reperformed automatically. You can examine all items of data rather than on a much more limited sample basis. And you're probably going to save costs. In this particular context, given that we're under some time pressure, using the benefits of audit software could be particularly pertinent in this audit job. Note it's not asking for any of the difficulties here. Explain the problems that could be encountered in the audit of Tyrrell, and for each problem, explain how it could be overcome. So there are kind of 2 requirements within that. Almost certainly the best way to set it out is going to be in a columnar form. The first column explaining the problem, and the second column explaining how you're going to overcome this problem. Remember, this has nothing specifically to do with audit software, though there's no reason why you can't bring in difficulties that may arise because you want to use audit software. There are 10 marks. I would imagine it's 1 mark for explaining the problem and 1 mark for explaining how you're going to overcome that. So we're looking for 5 problems really and 5 solutions. And I don't think there's a particular difficulty here. We can start off, for example, by saying there's a problem simply because it's a new audit client. Therefore, we are starting at a slight disadvantage. We know nothing about the client. And furthermore, because we've only got into the client about the 3rd of June, the amount of planning that's available to us is rather restricted. Remember to explain how you might overcome this. And the way we might have to overcome it is, for the first year at any rate, to put more staff in and better staff who are able to work more efficiently under the time pressure. Second potential problem is the relatively tight audit deadline of the 15th of August. This increases the audit risk. How can we overcome it? Again, perhaps by better planning, better staff, more staff. Another potential problem is the use of bespoke software. How do we know that the bespoke software is working correctly? Well, this is perhaps where we can say a way in which to overcome this difficulty is to use our audit software. If we're not sure that the bespoke software used by the company adds up the inventory, for example, run your own software against the inventory file and make sure it adds up correctly. It said we're going to use data which is live. Our audit software, our computer testing, will have to be run on a live basis. The potential difficulty there is if you're dealing with live data and you're running your software against it, you have to be careful not to corrupt that. Furthermore, if it's live data, that means it's continually used by the firm. How are we going to run our software against the data at the right time at exactly year end if the files are going to be changed within the next few hours as trading continues? Despite what it says about using live data, the most obvious solution to this is to take a copy of the data at the end of the year. This effectively freezes the data and allows us to work with that. Certainly I would have thought the auditor would want to take that copy, even if they're going to do most of their audit work on the live data. And then we have a major holiday period for the firm. Difficulties there are that we don't have enough staff or the right staff, or perhaps not the continuity of staff. We're already at the 3rd of June. Most staff are going to have their holidays booked and will be reluctant to change those holidays. It's going to take some very careful staff management indeed to make sure that the audit is properly staffed. A potential way around it is to look at existing audit clients and to see whether our plans for those could be changed. Perhaps we could postpone an interim audit of another client until late August, therefore freeing more staff for the current problem. Now let's look at part B. You have to be really quite careful here. The requirement is to explain how you will evaluate the computer systems documentation produced by the internal audit department in order to place reliance on it during your audit. This is very specific work that the internal audit department is carrying out, and you have to address your answer towards this very specific question. First, I think it's fair to say that producing documentation on a computer system is a specialist's job. Does the internal audit department have the expertise? Is there anyone there with IT experience who is capable of producing appropriate documentation, for example, file layouts and program flowcharts? Assuming there is someone there with the right sort of background, how is their work going to be assessed? What process does internal audit go through to review and to evaluate the work that has been carried out? Can we see any evidence of checks and reviews having taken place? Does the work look professional? Is it set out well with definitions? And if symbols are used in, say, logic flowcharts, are they used consistently? Does the documentation appear to be logical? Is there any way we could check some of the documentation to the actual performance of the software? For example, if the documentation says that certain exception reports are printed out, can we see some of those exception reports? Or if the documentation says that they're input checks, can we in some way test that those input checks are working? We're not carrying out an audit here. We're simply trying to assess that internal audit has been consistent and correct in recording the documentation for the computer system. Is there evidence that it is kept up to date? Almost certainly the client's computerized system will have to be updated from time to time, and it's essential that the documentation which accompanies that software is also updated.